Good evening. Thanks for coming tonight. I really appreciate it, and for you making this time for Bronxville. I'm Bob Underhill. I'm a trustee of the village, and I'm also serve as deputy mayor. My wife Sarah and I have been residents in Bronxville for 27 years now, and I've served as a trustee for 15 and a half of those years. Before we get going, we've just want to make sure everyone's observing social distancing. We have, which we're doing a great job at here. We have binders, water, hand sanitizer. Looks like most people wearing masks. That's great. I think that's a great idea. We have the door open. We have the air conditioning on high. We have the new air conditioning system, thanks to the library in the village and also the state of New York. So we're getting plenty of airflow. So I want to talk about what we're doing here. In June, that in response to a number of terrible and inexcusable deaths as a result of police activity across the country, the governor signed an executive order mandating that every municipality in the state with a police force undertake a comprehensive, fact-based, and honest review of current police force deployments, strategies, policies, training procedures, and practices. The governor was using a run-on sentence there too, I believe. And then he wanted every community to develop a plan to improve upon current practices for the purposes of addressing the particular needs of the community served by such agency, and to promote community engagement in order to foster trust, fairness, and legitimacy. I've been thinking about this, and I was thinking about the executive order, and not a big fan of executive orders, but in this case, I really find this as an unexpected blessing. While this is a mandate by the governor, I believe that this is a process that we should have been undertaking, but perhaps didn't have the imagination to do so. This mandate creates an opportunity for all stakeholders to become educated in the training and the policies and history of our police department, and then working with the local government, the trustees and the mayor, we can then, and with the police department, then we can enact improvements, and then only then we can foster a greater trust between the police department and the community that it serves, which is all of us. So the executive order, which is placed in your binder as tab number 1. This is your binder. Please keep it with you, and there's a lot in here. The executive order's in here, as well as the workbook, which I sent to each of you in PDF form, which is behind tab 10, which gives all of the kind of the background and thought process and questions that we should be asking through this process. So the executive order requires the head of local government, Mary Marvin, our mayor, to appoint a committee of stakeholders to conduct the review and develop a set of recommendations. The mayor has asked me to chair this committee, and I'm honored to do so. And in constituting the committee, we endeavored to create a group that represents all aspects of the community, from residents, students, educators, merchants, religious leaders, law enforcement, healthcare, and the court system. And so thanks a lot for being part of this process. I think it's a very, very important thing for the police department and the community at large. I would like to take a moment to go through, introduce our committee members. So first is Mary Marvin, the mayor, me, the deputy mayor, Jim Palmer, our village administrator, Chief Satriali, Lieutenant Bunyan, Nicholas DeYoung, Sergeant DeYoung. I don't think Steve Palm is here tonight. Anar Patel, raise your hand, thank you. Matthew Murphy, Mickey Kapoor, thank you, Mickey. Peter Thorpe, Dr. John Nunes from Concordia College, Reverend Michael Bird from the Christ Church, Bishop Derek Owens from Golden Sword, thank you, Bishop. Pastor Matt Waterstone from the Reformed Church, thank you, Pastor Matt. Father Peter McGoy, thank you, from St. Joe's. Reverend Robert Hartwell from the Lutheran Church, Rabbi Deutsch from the Chabad Jewish Center, hey Roy, thank you very much. Kelly Wield from Kelly, thank you, Kelly, nice to meet you. Thomas Harity, a student from the village of Bronxville, also forgot to mention Kelly is a student at Bronxville High School. Shannon Gangemi, thank you, Shannon. She represents the Bronxville Chamber of Commerce. She's the executive director. John Thomas, who is the Westchester County Assistant District Attorney and Deputy Bureau Chief, Mount Vernon Branch. Dr. Amit Shembakar from, he's with the Associate Medical Director at New York Presbyterian Lawrence and is, I think you're head of the emergency room. And Tamika Coverdale, who is with the Legal Aid Society and Region Chief. Thank you very much, Tamika. And George McInnes, I don't think is with us this evening. So that's our committee. As we move forward, this is an opportunity for us to all learn about the police training practices, policies, history, budget, etc. Our next meeting will be, and we'll go over the agenda later, we'll have 2 public sessions, which we will be inviting the public to provide comment on their perspective of police practices, training, etc. We'll have 2 of those sessions. All of these sessions will be recorded, as is this one, which will be available on the village website on YouTube, and the subsequent public meetings will be recorded as well. So your presence is encouraged at the subsequent meetings. We understand that everyone here, you wouldn't be here if you're not busy and having a lot to do, because you're an important part of the community. So we understand if you can't make one or both, but please make a point of watching the recording sessions. In early December, after our 2 public commentaries, we'll be meeting as a group to discuss potential recommendations and craft a set of recommendations that will go to will go to the police department and to the village. We will then, after those get refined, we'll be opening those to public comment. And then once we follow with public comment, we will be making a submission to the village trustees for adoption. That will be at the March meeting. So we'll be voting for adoption of any planned reforms or changes to policies or procedures at the March Board of Trustees meeting to be submitted to the state by the end of March. See, one thing I'd also like to, before we get started here, but before turning this over to Chief Satriali, I thought I'd just mention the role that I play as trustee and also play a role as village commissioner. So as do all trustees within the village of Bronxville. And that's true across all villages in the state of New York. The village trustees serve as police commissioners. So we are a civilian body that governs the police department. Our role as police commissioners is to weigh in on hirings, promotion, and disciplinary proceedings where we act as, in effect, judge and jury before disciplinary hearings. But I thought I'd just provide that context from my perspective as village trustee. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Satriali. So Chief, you joined the force 32 years ago, and then it was about 13 years ago you became chief. That's correct? Yes, sir. I'll turn it over to you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Underhill. You certainly have established and formulated an impressive committee of stakeholders within the village. I'm sure it was difficult in limiting members that wanted to participate, and I think it's a fantastic idea to have the public forum so that we could get input from everyone who was impacted by policing in Bronxville. As you mentioned, I'm in my 33rd year here in the Village of Bronxville's Police Department, the last 13 or so as police chief. I was born in Lawrence Hospital, raised in Eastchester, graduated Eastchester High School, attended Pace University in Pleasantville, and was fortunate enough at about 19 years and 10 months old to score high enough on the police exam and become a police officer here in Bronxville. You're going to hear a lot this evening about policing in Bronxville, our policy, our procedure, our training. Many of my colleagues were upset with this executive order, felt that the governor went too far, felt that the governor was trying to do a one-size-fits-all for policing when it really is impossible to compare some towns, cities, and villages. As the Bronxville government has welcomed this executive order, so do I and every member of my police department. We have been here, I have been here for 33 years, I've been chief for 14. You'll hear from the statistics, you'll hear from the training, and you'll hear from our discipline record that we welcome any review of our department, of our policies, and of our training. We feel, as you move through this process and study your binder and the guide, that we have met or exceeded most of what the governor is asking us to do. And we are open to change. We are open to tweaking policy. We are open to additional training. And we also we have watched policing throughout the country in the past 3 or 4 months deteriorate. We had watched the relationship between police and community deteriorate. We were outraged at the George Floyd incident, as well as many others. We do not support that kind of behavior. We do not condone that kind of behavior, and we don't believe we have any of it here in the Village of Bronxville. And through this process, it's our duty and our responsibility to show you how we feel that way, why we feel that way, and to confirm to you as a community and stakeholders that you're in good hands here in the Village of Bronxville under the direction of Mayor Marvin, the Board of Trustees, and this police department. So I feel I should just do a little history. We are not going to cover everything in your binder. There are 2 Monday night football games. Sergeant Anderson in the back is a Bills fan. They're playing now. I'm a Cowboys fan. They're playing at 8 p.m. There's a reason why we did this at 5 and not 8. So, Richie, sorry. So there's a lot of information for you to digest within the binder. There's homework. You can see in my tab, which starts in 3, our department organization. Any document you see in this form is right from our policy and procedure manual. Lieutenant Bunyan will go through that shortly. This is our organizational chart, and this establishes our chain of command as well. Starts with the chief, a lieutenant, detective sergeant, detective, and then the lieutenant. Lieutenant's chain of command breaks out into the sergeants and patrol division. You can see our department personnel on the next page. By name, listed on our website is the roster by name and the email. Feel free at any time to reach out to any police officer or any command officer within the department with a question, inquiry, or complaint. Tab 4 is our budget. If you turn about 5 pages in, the back of the 5th page is a graph which shows our budget, total budget over the last 10 years. You'll see an increase, modest increase over that 10-year period. A lot of that is personnel, services, salaries. We hire a police officer. The police officer starts at a first grade police officer salary, significantly less than when they reach top pay in their 4th and 5th year. So as we filled positions and vacancies within the police department, we hired officers at first grade salary. When they hit top pay, that's an increase in budget. We've also added a couple of items into our operating budget that used to be in capital that has resulted in that increase. But we run a very efficient, very lean department. Myself and my staff is on top of expenditures. This budget includes everything from pencils to personnel. And I'm pleased to report, we have been under budget for that 10-year period each and every year. While situations arise and overtime is an estimate, we have been able to respond to those incidents and stay within budget for that 10-year period. In tab 5, I think this sums up just about everything that I could say tonight. I will not read it, but it is important that at some point this evening or moving forward that you read this. This is a column that I collaborated with the mayor and deputy mayor on in June in response to what was happening throughout the country, and in response to many residents and many visitors and many merchants questioning, well, what do we do in Bronxville? How many police officers do we have? Are we having discipline problems? Are we having use of force problems? So if you look, department overview, I will summarize. Historic high for the Bronxville Police Department was 28 members. We're down to 21. Doing the same work that chiefs and executives did with 28, we are doing with 21 officers. The village board realized in this past budget that to continue to provide the high level of service that was required here in Bronxville and what Bronxville deserves, we had to add back a position or two and begin to restore some positions. I don't think we'll ever get to the 28. I don't feel it's necessary either. But we moved from 21 to 23. Those hirings will be permitted to happen come January. We paused the hiring because of COVID, cannot conduct proper interviews and background investigations without being on top of people. So we will move to 23. We have great plans for those 2 extra officers. And the timing of this review is perfect because I'm sure this committee will come out with some recommendations that will make those 2 officers very useful and very helpful here in the village. We average about 3,300 calls a year. You'll see our arrest statistics soon in this binder. 90% of all arrests are from calls to the police desk. It's important to remember that statistic. 90% are on call, not on view. So many places that might have issues with racial profiling or traffic stops leading to arrests, 90% of our arrests are on call. That means somebody called the desk reporting a crime. Only 10% are on view. Our cameras, you're all familiar with our cameras. We don't hide them. We purposely ordered the biggest ones they had, and as far as encasing our camera and lens, it acts as a deterrent. We were a little nervous, a little apprehensive in the beginning about people complaining, but to date, the complaints we receive are, why don't I have a camera on my block? When are we getting a camera on my block? The cameras have been invaluable in preventing crime, detecting crime, solving crimes. Training. Nick will speak for a half hour or so on our training needs. Nick is a sergeant with the police department, formerly from the New York City Police Department. He is our training supervisor, and he will explain all his credentials and training when he gets up here. Quite impressive. And you will find that for a small department, our training is well beyond what is expected, well beyond the minimum standard put out by the Department of Criminal Justice Services. Our weapons training, Nick will discuss as well. You could see our 2010 to 2020 arrests by race. Those statistics are directly from our records management system and our uniform crime report. And Nick has that on the screen now.
Where's that? Is there a tab on that?
That's in the end of the mayor's and your column on policing. I will join you a little later to discuss the guide that the governor put out. I'd like to again thank you for volunteering to be on the committee. I'd like to thank the deputy mayor for including the police department in this committee, at least on night one. We understand that there will be conversations and discussions where we should not be privy to and in that room, maybe some difficult discussions and debate. And we welcome the recommendations of this committee as we move forward with continuing our professional and effective and efficient and safe policing within the village of Bronxville.
Thank you, Chief. So, Nick, yeah,
Rich.
so, oh, it's Rich. Okay, so Lieutenant Bunyan. Please, thank you.
So good evening. A little bit of a bait and switch. I thought I was here because the chief was about to announce my impending promotion. Foiled again.
Let's see if the committee recommends that.
So my name is Rich Bunyan. I'm a police lieutenant here, second in command. I started my career in 1982 in the city of Mount Vernon. After about 2.5 years or so, I transferred over here to Bronxville, and I've been here since. So I've just completed my 38th year of service, 36 of which has been with the village. I was lucky enough, when I came here from Mount Vernon, the village had a program where they reimbursed for college education. I continued my education and graduated from Mercy College and went on to receive my law degree from Pace University, where I received my JD in 1991. So the chief has asked me to come and speak about our policies and procedures and a little historical perspective on the department. So I started out with the Village Police Act, which is the statute that was passed in 1936, which basically is the roadmap for how a police department that's a village in Westchester County has been established. If you look at tab 6, paragraph 8, administration, it talks about how the village board of trustees, as the deputy mayor has explained in his opening comments, sits as a board of police commissioners. What that means is that they are the civilian head of our police department. The chief is the head sworn officer of the department. He answers to the village board. As part of their duties, the village board of trustees, sitting as the board of police commissioners, has to adopt our rules and regulations. In 2014, the chief and I were discussing our rules and regs, and they were kind of fragmented in a couple of different locations and repositories. The chief came up with the direction that we needed to combine all of it and come out with a comprehensive set of rules and regs. So in 2014, I took on the task. It took quite a while. Right now, we have an existing set of policies that adds up to about, I think I just checked before I came over, was 450 odd pages of rules and regs. And they speak to everything as far as hiring, qualifications, the uniforms, officers' appearances, discipline, investigations, everything that we do as a police department, for the most part, is contained in that 450 odd pages. What we have looked at is that that's literally a document that needs to be updated on a regular basis. So about 1.5 years ago or so, we were approached by a vendor called Lexipol. And Lexipol is this service where you subscribe to this company, and what they do is they come up with 160 policies in New York that they believe need to be covered. And we looked at it, and the best advantage to Lexipol, we believed, was the fact that they have on staff attorneys, who just monitor all the courts for the latest decisions. They monitor Albany as far as the legislative enactments, and they push out to you real time those changes. And not only do they push them out, but they tell you where in your policies they belong. So we started up sometime last year working on that. Again, it's not something that happens overnight. We have a lot of different policies. We have investigative policies that I have to push over to like Detective Sergeant Anderson for his input as the subject matter expert, or to Nick on our tactical team on how we should respond to certain calls. So once we push that out, we get the information back. I've gone through and started modifying their model policies to make it fit our department. So we're still in the process of doing that. We're pretty far along in that process, and our intention is that somewhere around the first of the year, early next year, we're going to be in a position where we come back to the Village Board of Trustees to ask them to review our proposed policies and then have the board adopt them. That's the same process we did in 2015. We came up with the rules and regs, put it out to the supervisors for their input. We put it out to the PBA for the union input. And then once we had our documents in order, we brought it over to the village board for their review. So all 5 board members reviewed the policy. There was a period of time that they had to review and then adopt. So the Lexapol selling point is not only that they're giving you 160 model policies that they update with the current law, but they also train you on it. So our officers will have the ability, or they'll have the requirement, actually, to train every day, believe it or not. There's what they call a daily training bulletin that Lexapol sends to us as the administrators. Chief and I review them, make sure they're appropriate for our department, and then we push them out to each one of our cops. Our cops will have about a 5 or 10 minute training program every day where they're going to have to read a fact-based scenario, read our policy, give the appropriate answer, and what we get from it is not only the benefit of a daily training, but we get an electronic copy that they actually engaged in the training and passed the question that was asked of them. So that's important for us, because today for us to do training, it's literally, where's your training records? So-and-so at 10, did they pass the test? Did they do what was required? Lexapol has really made it very easy for us to do. So we're looking forward to that, and it's going to really advance our department and make us more accountable, make it more transparent, and make it easier for us to quantify our officers' training accomplishments. If you can go to the complaint form. One of my duties as the lieutenant, the second in charge of the department, is I'm in charge of internal affairs. I am the internal affairs officer. So any complaints of officer misconduct come to me for investigation. Our policy requires that we have a complaint form. The complaint form that's in your binder in that tab 7 is the complaint form that we have. Any member of the public who has a problem with our officers, whether he was rude on a traffic stop or she engaged possibly in serious misconduct, whatever the range is, that information comes to me for investigation. They're kept confidential. The only people that are involved in the investigation are myself and the chief would be kept informed. But that is the form that we promulgated when we came up with the policy in 2015. Sorry? No sweat. Again, you'll see there on page 7, on tab 7. And it just would out of order a little bit on the Lexapol version. So to get back to the daily training bulletins, the officers will come into roll call. They'll check for their emails. They'll check any reports that came in since the last tour that they worked. And then they would log on to Lexapol. They can do that from the building. They can do that from the radio cars. All our cars are equipped with computer systems. Or they can do it from their smartphone on an app that we'll eventually have as well. And that basically covers where, our state of affairs today as far as our policies. Again, I think our 2015 policies stand up to scrutiny. We spent a lot of time We looked at our counterparts in different municipalities as to what they're doing. Some things we liked, some things we didn't. Modified it for our own purposes and have adopted them. I just think Lexipol takes it to the next level. When there was the legislative updates that came out just a couple of months ago, what I would normally have to do is, first of all, I would have to know that they occurred. And that means that I'd have to be searching the web myself or going on Lexis and checking for any updates. I don't have to do that anymore. Now it's done for us. And so we're able to push those out, again, real time, with subject matter experts. These guys are attorneys and write policies for police departments for best practices, whether it's federal government, state courts, or state government. They're on top of it. And again, a worthwhile investment. I think it's $5,000. I think the village is spending about $5,000 a year for this program. And again, I think it's money well spent. Any questions? Good.
Thank you, Rick. Now, we're going to hear from Sergeant DeYoung, Nicholas DeYoung, who conduct our training.
Like I know what I'm doing with that.
You probably know more than I do.
Should have practiced.
Hey, how's everyone doing? My name is Sergeant Nicholas DeYoung. As the chief says, I have a lot of training, but none of it is in computers. So if I'm fumbling through here, I apologize. I picked the worst guy in the department to do the computer, but we're gonna. Well, maybe him. Maybe the second worst. So I am the training supervisor. I'm also the instructor for pretty much every training program we have. I hold instructor certification in it. I'm one of our instructors that teaches. So I put together a little background on our training program for everyone. So rather than us be here for the next 4 or 5 hours going over all of our different training programs, I'm trying to encapsulate what we do into a relatively short PowerPoint, but we'll try to go over as much as we can. We'll go over as well as our use of force policy and how we dictate the use of force in the department. You go ahead. So we'll start off right at the beginning with our firearms training. So our department, you go ahead, thanks. Our department, a little background for our firearms, our service weapon is a Glock Model 22 40 caliber handgun. Our officers are trained starting in the police academy through Westchester County Department of Public Safety. That's where they learn initial firearms familiarization, safe use of the firearms, and additionally, annually, our officers are receiving anywhere from 8 to 16, sometimes an initial 24 hours of firearms training. It changes every year because of, like this past year, we were kind of hamstrung by COVID. It kept us from getting out to the range because the range was actually closed. But our officers are getting 8 hours of handgun training every year and in-service training through Westchester County Police Academy, which is run by the Department of Public Safety. Additional to that, our department hosts an additional 8 hours on average of training every year. That's taught by our training staff, by myself and my 2 other instructors. And that's where we kind of institute our own training program with our officers. You go ahead. This is there's just a brief overview of a day at the range for us. Just want to give somebody, it's a little, not so much an in-depth view of what we are actually teaching our officers. So we are always going over safe weapons handling. We're always going over every time we go to the range, we're working on what I put in here is shoot, no shoot drills. It's just the way I'm reporting. That's our policy of de-escalation. We're trying to enforce making our officers make decisions. And then from there, we just go through. But every time we shoot, our officers will shoot a qualification course of fire where they have to qualify with their firearm. If they don't shoot to the standard, they have to go for retraining and continue on. We don't have that problem. Everybody's shooting to the standard, but we have that in there. Okay. Our department also utilizes patrol rifles. So our officers who have demonstrated a higher level of aptitude with the patrol rifle are able to carry them. We don't blanket hand out rifles to every officer. It's a higher level of training, and we don't want people that are uncomfortable with the rifle to have them. So as of right now, we have 13 officers in our department that are qualified to carry a patrol rifle, and they do so. For every tour that we have, it's probably those officers are spread out amongst. So we always have a patrol rifle available And the reason we started carrying patrol rifles is that throughout the country, to respond to acts of active shooter, mass violence events, departments start to transition to patrol rifles. It just allows us, I put it here, force multiplier, but it's just an option for us to be able, if we ever had a situation like that, we would have the tools available to do so, to engage that threat. And also, all of our patrol rifles are carried. We have hardened locked boxes in all of our cars where they would be, so they're secure and held there. This is just the same with the handgun. I just did a brief patrol rifle training. So this is what we're doing twice a year as well, 8 hours total a year, recertifying all of our officers that are certified to carry the rifle. We'll move on to some of our less lethal options, less lethal training that we do. All of our officers carry on patrol less lethal options, including we have expandable batons, and we utilize the TASER CEW. I'll go over TASER separately in the next slide. Additionally, our sergeants are trained with additional less lethal options. So we have a 12-gauge less lethal shotgun. It fires a beanbag round. It's an impact weapon. It's on the same level as a baton. And we also have a pepperball OC launcher, which is a paintball gun that fires paintball rounds, except they're filled with Pava powder. It's an irritant. It's essentially powderized OC spray that we would use in our spray. And those are just our sergeants are trained to higher level, and so they carry those. And that's just to be able to use where we want to deploy a less lethal option, where we have the option of, we would use it in a situation where someone might be violent and possibly armed, and we don't want to have to rise to the level of deadly physical force, so we have another option. We have that less lethal option. All of our sergeants and officers that are certified to carry them also requalify annually with the less lethal. All of our officers are trained and carry the TASER X26P CEW. TASER is the brand. Everybody knows what TASER is. TASER is the brand. The device is a conducted electrical weapon. What it does is it's providing a electronic charge that can momentarily incapacitate a subject. We're utilizing our tasers as a less lethal option for someone who's violent that we need to control. It produces a 50,000 volts that interferes with, to break it down pretty basically, just interfering with the way your body is sending commands to your arms and your legs, and the information your body's taking in. So that's why you see the people that might be incapacitated. They work on 5-second bursts, so we are able to utilize that window of opportunity to control and handcuff a violent suspect. It's in our policies, we'll go over it, but TASER for us is a level of use of force is on the same as a baton. We don't use TASERs for anything other than people that are resisting violently. We don't use it for running or passive resistance. Active shooter training. You can go forward. This is where we had an issue with it. Yeah, it's not going to play because it's going to block. So like I said, computer issues. But the previous picture that was on the screen was officers. That was a picture that was taken at Lawrence Hospital last March, where we had an active shooter incident, which turned out to not be an active shooter incident. But this is a video that we used. It was coverage. It's not playing for whatever reason. But I just put these in here to stress the importance. The reason we spend a lot of time on active shooter situations, mass violence events with our officers is it could happen anywhere at any time. We experienced it last March at Lawrence Hospital. I was one of the initial officers on scene with some of my other officers, and the information that we received from the call, the information that we were receiving throughout the entire event, we treated as though it was an active shooter until we could prove otherwise. So we were able to utilize our training and quickly perform an initial search of the building, ensure that there was no shooting going on, that everybody was safe, and then with our partners from around the county, we were able to conduct a larger search of the building to make sure that actually everything was fine. So you can go forward there, Lou. Fun fact that at 8:30 on Sunday night, I was in Lawrence Hospital searching for an active shooter, and at 6 a.m. the next morning I was there because my son was born at Lawrence Hospital the next morning, which was a lot of fun. So our active shooter training, all of our officers are trained in active shooter response. They have an initial training and we retrain annually. It's because The things we're learning through active shooter response, we can utilize for everyday situations for police work. Response to someone that might have a weapon, someone that might be violent. We're teaching our officers tactics to help keep them safe and keep the public safe. The specific training that our officers receive is alert active shooter level 1. It's that's just pretty much the national standard for active shooter response now. We try to train everybody in the same. We're all on the same page with our training, so we can work together with different departments. The new, or not new, it's been a model for a while, but all of our officers are trained in immediate response to active shooter and mass violence events. We're not waiting around anymore for additional personnel. Our officers are trained in 1, 2, 3-man responses to events. And so the purpose of that is, our goal is to utilize team movements and tactics to effectively stop any threat and then treat and evacuate any possible victims. All of our active shooter training, we're utilizing scenario-based and force-on-force training. The reason we do that is we're making our officers think. We're trying to get them making decisions. And we've been lucky enough from the department to provide us with the tools to do so. We have various force-on-force tools, training tools we have that we utilize any chance we get. We've also been able to partner with our surrounding jurisdictions of Tuckahoe and Eastchester, and we perform multi-jurisdictional training with them. Not just active shooter, we do everything we can with them because we all work together. We're small departments, and we are able to have a larger response to events. Go forward. I included this. This is my shameless plug to everybody in the room. I teach a civilian response to active shooter events course. It's through the same alert training program that we do active shooter for police officers. They do a course to train civilians. We make it available free of charge to anybody that's interested, whether it be businesses, schools, house of worship, anybody in the community that has a group of people that you want me to come in, we'll do teaching. We put pause for a while with COVID, but if anybody is interested, my email is there. Call, let me know, and we will figure out a way to get that scheduled for you. And that's what we're teaching there is civilian response to any type of active shooter, mass violence, or just a violent event in your building or institution. And we can help you develop a better security plan for yourself. To date, we've trained churches and schools within the village, and we're always looking for more. So please reach out to me, let me know if anybody's interested. Go ahead. Defensive tactics and our de-escalation. All of our officers are trained initially in defensive tactics in their recruit training, so that's the police academy. Annually, our officers go through in-service training at the police academy where they receive additional defensive tactics course training. We currently, as the Bronxville Police, don't have a certified defensive tactics instructor. We're working on that to add that to augment our training as well. Can you hand me my binder? Yeah. All right, our use of force training. I know this by heart, I swear, I just can't see over there, so I don't want to get lost with anybody. Our use of force training. So that's the coverage from our policy you'll see. It's just describing how we utilize our force. So all our use of force required to accomplish or the performance of our official duties is governed by Article 35 of the New York State Penal Law. And you'll see in our policy later on, I linked the policy in there, you can read it, we can go over it. All of our officers are trained annually, and we go over annually Article 35 of the Penal Law, as well as our department use of force standards and policies. We go over it annually because it's one of the most important things that we have to stress for our policies. Also, it changes because this year we had it changes with the banning of chokeholds in the state. So we have to adjust our policies and our training as such. So all of our officers get retrained so that we're all on the same page. And like I said, our use of force is our department policy 106-1. That's in the back of the binders. We'll link to that when we go over the questions later. You can go forward, Lou. This is a quick Brief statistics looking over our use of force incidents in the last 10 years. You can see that we don't have a lot of uses of force in the village. We're lucky enough that we don't. I'll further clarify that the way our current use of force policy is, we have to fill out a use of force form whenever there's a discharge of a firearm. It's a great policy. However, it also applies to, in a village like Bronxville, where we have to maybe possibly dispatch a sick animal, such as a raccoon or a rabid animal. So in some of these years where, in 2017, where we have 10 uses of force, I think 4 of those are where we had to dispatch raccoons. So we weren't, that's a use of force that's not really a use of force, but we still clarify it, so.
Define what a use of force is
Yep.
outside of that general.
So as per our department policy, we have to, we dictate, sorry, I'm gonna go over it just so I don't get out of here. So our guidelines are our use of force. Every time that we have to use physical force against a person. So our progression of force, we always utilize the least amount of force necessary. We go from, there's no real, we're not using a continuum of force anymore. We're going through our different levels of force, but because any event, especially a violent event with someone is fluid, we allow our officers to be able to move through those different levels of force to accomplish the goal without injuring themselves or the public. So we have verbal direction, which is our least amount of force possible, which is just giving verbal commands, talking to somebody. We have physical direction, which may be something as much as grabbing someone and having to control them, or fist, somebody is trying to violently attack you and you only have your hands to protect yourselves. From there, we have impact weapons, which is our baton, our beanbag rounds, our less lethal option, as well as our tasers. They're on the same level of force. And from there, we have our firearms, which is our deadly physical force. So anytime our officers utilize force to effect an arrest, to control somebody above simply just putting handcuffs on, they have to complete a use of force form, which is then submitted to their immediate supervisor for review, and then goes to the lieutenant for review, and then we'll also, as the training staff, we'll look at it to make sure it was within policy, but also we're performing our tactics are up to par, where we need them to be, to help ensure the safety of our officers and the public. So that's where I'm including our use of force statistics. That's simply these statistics in here that are times where our officers have rise to the level of having to put their hands on someone all the way up to using impact weapons. And if you see, I compared it with our amount of blotters per year, and you'll see our interaction with the public, and these are just our calls. These are calls that we have to go on. That's not including our car stops or any type of other things that we don't have reported there. Our use of force is very low in the village. You go ahead. On top of this, I just want to note also that we have not, the 2010 to 2020, the last 10 years we went through, we have not had a single use of force complaint from the public. We've not had a single complaint that's been investigated from any member of the public. And all incidents in which we've used force were found to be within department policy. De-escalation training is a popular term now, and it should be. We've been training de-escalation in our officers every year since I've been in this and well before. We teach de-escalation as part of our tactics. It's part of everything we do. Simply getting out of the car and interacting with a person, we're aiming for de-escalation. We're trying to teach our officers, whether it's verbal commands, proper use of proper tactics to de-escalate a situation de-escalate a situation to begin with. Having said that, we are sending 2 officers, myself and one of my training staff, to a specifically de-escalation instructor course in November to enhance that training even greater. So we're going to have to adjust our training program after that, which we will do. One thing about our training program is we are able to adjust as necessary. We are changing what we're training to fit in the time that we have allotted with our officers, because with a small department it can be difficult to find the time to get everybody. But we're able to adjust our training to fit what's going on in the world, to fit situations that we're seeing we might be getting ourselves into more and more, and we can adjust at that point we can adjust the training as necessary from there. You can go ahead. Specialized training. All of our officers are trained in basic first aid. They're also trained in CPR and use of AEDs. Our AEDs, automatic external defibrillators, are carried in every police vehicle. Also, all of our officers are carrying naloxone with them on their person. Naloxone is Narcan. It's used to counter opioid overdoses. On top of that, we've also augmented all of our officers a little higher level of life-saving equipment. So on everyone's duty belt, they carry basic life-saving equipment such as hemostatic gauze, which is is gauze with a clotting agent on it for lacerations, and tourniquets. All of our officers carry tourniquets to be utilized whether for themselves or the public. And I've utilized those myself on people. So we're utilizing these different equipment we have. Can you go back, Luke? Just hit backspace. Backspace. Backspace again. All right. On top of another specialized training we have is we have 3 officers that are trained to a higher level by the National Tactical Officers Association of SWAT officers. It's myself and 2 other officers. And we serve on a multi-jurisdictional emergency response unit comprised of Bronxville, Tuckahoe, Eastchester, and Pelham, which is just every department is having a certain amount of members that are trained higher level that can respond to critical events. I'll note that the team, we are a certified New York State SWAT team, which is, there's not that many teams in the state that are actually certified. It takes a lot. It's a lot of training, and you have to prove a lot of stuff going forward with the state. So we train to a higher level. We utilize ERU officers and teams for high-risk warrant service. Everyone's trained in less lethal and chemical agents, higher level of less lethal tools, barricaded suspects, and it goes on and on. It's a tactical option for a critical response. On top of all of the other training that my officers are doing, myself and all the other ERU officers in Bronxville complete an additional 96 to 120 hours of training a year to remain a member there. Our officers, we also have 8 officers that are certified as bike officers, Special Operations Bicycle Unit. We utilize the bike, people see it around the business district a lot. We utilize bicycle officers to address quality of life issues, public relations. It's just another option to have an officer out in the community. Juvenile training, we are lucky enough to have 12 officers certified through New York State as juvenile officers. Juvenile officers go to a school, they're trained in how to deal with juveniles. So they are getting more training in the laws and procedures of juvenile custody, and you can read through the rest, but there's higher levels of training when dealing with juveniles in the state, and that's what our officers do. And they'll do follow-ups with juveniles after events. We also have, this is just a quick, like I said, I'm going a little bit long here, but just, this is a quick breakdown. This isn't everything, but some of the higher level of training that some of our officers have. We have 9 officers that are general topic instructors. They can teach. We have 1 officer, that's me. I'm a tactical officer, a tactical less lethal weapons instructor. I'm one of the few in the county that can teach that. We have 3 officers that are firearms instructors, 2 officers that are patrol rifles instructors. Like I said, 3 SWAT officers. We have 2 officers who are school resource officers. 7 of our officers are trained criminal investigators. So we have a lot of training within the village and within the department. And we have a lot of our supervisors go through FBI Supervisor Leadership Institute, which is a great tool for our supervisors to teach them. And then our in-service training, like I covered before, annually our officers are going to Westchester County Police Academy through the Department of Public Safety for an additional 24 to 36 hours of 32 hours of training every year. I included a copy of the Westchester County Police's their curriculum right behind this in the binder. I don't, if everybody wants to go through that on your own, that's Westchester County covering what they're teaching both in recruit training and then also in service training. And then there's if you wanted to go There's a YouTube link here. This is an hour-long video that the Academy put together that covers their training. So if you have some time, you want to go through there, that'll encompass that.
The chief is going to take you through essentially the questions that were posed in the book that I forwarded to you in PDF format. That was the New York State Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative. Through that entire document, it asks a series of questions. Hundreds of questions through there. And so some of those are very relevant to Bronxville, some are irrelevant. I just don't touch on Bronxville. But I thought it'd be really helpful for the chief to go through and not all of those questions, but a series of the higher importance for us. These are highlighted in tab 11, and I think that it's really important that we each go through and understand these answers and responses and see if we agree with them, we want to change them, we want to augment them, we want to delete them. But I will turn this over to you, Chief. Sure.
All of our instructor school training, I'm one of those 7, tell you to give a break after an hour, but and the bottles of water didn't help, I know. With COVID, we're not going to give a break. If you need to use the restroom, feel free to head up to the restroom. Please put your mask on and sanitize. The guide that the deputy mayor sent out, that the governor put out for us, was more than 130 pages. I'm a member of the Westchester County Chiefs of Police Association, as well as the New York State Chiefs of Police Association, as well as the International Association of Chiefs of Police. And those 3 organizations examined the guide from the governor and came out with this guideline here. And it's the most applicable and relevant information that they were able to pull from the guide that they deemed best practices for police departments moving forward, rather than try and go page for page on the 134. So I will not cover every single answer here. I will browse over some, but this, moving forward, this is what you're going to focus on, I would think, as a committee. This is directly from the governor's executive order and his guide, and you will be charged as a committee to address what has been outlined in these questions. And the title is simple: what functions should the police perform? There's been much debate since many of the incidents throughout the country. What functions should the police perform, and where, and when? The Attorney General of the state of New York has put out an opinion that police officers should not stop cars anymore. We don't necessarily support that opinion. We understand that car stops and some encounters with the public result in negative encounters. We think that that kind of reform goes too far. So
Chief,
yes, sir.
Can we hear that again?
The Attorney General of the state of New York has made a recommendation specifically to the New York City Police Department that they may want to consider no more traffic stops, as traffic stops lead to negative encounters with motorists. And to eliminate those negative encounters, they shouldn't stop any more cars.
This is directed to the city of New York only.
Correct. Correct. So this committee, this booklet will examine policing in Bronxville. What role do the police currently play in your community? This is right from our mission statement. We're a state-of-the-art, professionally staffed law enforcement agency, and we're charged with public safety throughout the village. Make sure that every resident, visitor, merchant, and passerby is safe while they're conducting their business or just visiting the village of Bronxville. Should you deploy social service personnel instead of or in addition to police officers in some situations? This goes back to what I said at first, the one-size-fits-all model for policing. Bigger city police departments that have more staff and more social service support, certainly I can see as a law enforcement executive, partnering police departments or having units within police departments that support social services and might send out somebody on an emotionally disturbed person call or on a call where somebody is in an agitated state. I don't see how it could apply here. There's no way we could support that kind of unit. What we're hopeful for is that out of this study of every department in the county, that there's a return to the crisis intervention team within Westchester County, which was a team that we could call on. They were dispatched out of the Westchester Medical Center, and they would come on calls where there was an emotionally disturbed person or somebody in need of some emotional support, not necessarily from a police officer. And they would dispatch somebody that had more training and qualifications. So we're hopeful that the crisis intervention team is reborn out of this review. Yes?
But don't you think it would be really where it need not be?
Absolutely. We support that model, and we're fortunate enough that we have Lawrence Hospital here. So we're hopeful that that crisis team, just like the same nurses in sexual assault cases, we would be able to lean on somebody in Lawrence Hospital for that immediate response. Other jurisdictions would have to be a shared services component of that, absolutely. Can your community reduce violence more effectively by redeploying resources from policing of other programs? Our violent crime stats are very low. We're very proud of that statistic. A lot of it has to do with our constant patrolling and our deterrent patrols. We don't have any resources. You see, we went from 28 to 21. We don't have 3 people in headquarters doing records or doing accident reports that we can redeploy. Lieutenant and I are in our office and running out of the office on calls to help the 2 officers that are out there. There's only 2 officers patrolling at any given time in the village. When they need help, it's me, the lieutenant, it's the detective sergeant. We don't have those resources within our building that we can redeploy, so it's really not applicable to us. 911 call center, we are the 911 call center. Part of those 3,000 calls are the 911 calls. Most of the calls for crimes come in via 911. Our dispatcher, our desk officer answers those 911 calls. Should we have a presence in the schools? Absolutely. I think unequivocally anybody can support the idea that a police officer present in the school and fostering strong relationships with school staff and students is critical in moving forward in how we police here in the village. And I was the only New York State certified youth officer in the village of Bronxville when I took over as chief. And as Nick showed you, we trained 11 more and 2 SROs. We share an office in the school with the head of security, and we encourage our officers pre-COVID to go into school, spend some time, have some lunch, discuss issues with the kids and staff, and be a physical presence within that school and establish positive relationships with the students. We will continue that once we clear COVID and once the school building is open full-time. Our officers would be a presence in the school. I support that wholeheartedly. Staffing, budgeting, and equipment within the police department. You've heard a lot about staffing and budgeting already, and equipment. This board, without question, for the last 13 years and moving forward so far, has been the most supportive board in my 33 years here as far as public safety. Anything I've asked for, whether it's equipment or training and can explain the need for, the board has supported. This village administrator has been the most supportive village administrator in my 33 years here when I go to him and say, Jim, you got to get the board to give me this. Well, why? There's always an explanation. I have the documentation, and he has been a partner in that effort for staffing, budgeting, and equipping the police department. The 2 positions is a perfect example of that. Very difficult times with COVID going on when we were doing our budget, January, February, and March. COVID hit hard in March. Municipalities were cutting back. The school districts were cutting back. The state was cutting back. This board supported a position and a half effective June 1, and the second half of that position, January 1 of 2021, at a time when people were cutting back because they understood the need for continued community policing, continued presence in the school, continued traffic enforcement, and crime prevention. Should components of the police department be civilianized? No, seems like a crude answer. It just doesn't apply. We don't, we're not that big city police department where we can have civilian dispatchers, civilian clerks, civilian records officers, civilians in the DD doing investigations. Go back to 21, we're a small, lean department, and we don't have an opportunity to civilianize anything that we do within the department at this point. How should police engage in crowd control? Should police be demilitarized? Another popular subject throughout the country over the past 2 or 3 years, when there has been news accounts and news footage of police departments and police officers responding to crowds with tanks and MRAP, military equipment, and patrol rifles. All that equipment, most of that equipment, and the controversy on a national level was born out of the 1033 program. It's a program when the military has finished with their equipment and it's no longer useful to the military. They are providing that equipment free to municipalities for use by their police department. It could be a podium or it could be a tank. Nick doesn't like me to say tank. What do you want me to say?
They're armored vehicles.
They're armored vehicles, they're not tanks. So it could be a desk, a chair, or an armored vehicle. The village of Bronxville has examined all that equipment that was available to us throughout the 1033 program in the past 13 years, and we have not received any equipment from the 1033 program. So this question really does not apply to us. If there was a piece of equipment that was there that we thought would be helpful in our policing, we certainly would take advantage of it. But we have the advantage, number one, of being neighbors with Yonkers, the city of Yonkers, who is by far one of the most professionally trained and staffed police departments in the state. They have all the most advanced equipment and are within minutes of us. We've had multiple incidents within the Bronxville School. We've had multiple incidents at Lawrence Hospital, and those officers were here within minutes, if not seconds. The Lawrence Hospital call, they nearly cleared the entire city of Yonkers to come and help us with the potential active shooter. So we're fortunate that we have our partner in Yonkers and our partners throughout Westchester County, that we have never felt the need to take advantage of any military equipment being given to us by the federal government. Our crowd control goes back to our training. That's why we have a pepper ball gun in the event we need to disperse a crowd. It's less than lethal. The things you should continue to remember, Nick mentioned it a bunch of times, less than lethal and de-escalation. We've been training de-escalation before de-escalation became popular. We've been deploying less than lethal weapons and options before less than lethal weapons and options became popular. People are catching up to the Village of Bronxville Police Department. I'm proud to say that. It may sound arrogant. Some people think I'm arrogant. I'm just confident in the training and the equipment and the performance of my officers, and the statistics bear it out. I counted up to 42 use of force reports in 10 years, 0, as Nick said, complaints in those 42 incidents that we used excessive force, 0 false arrest lawsuits. So I'm confident in the training and the programs that Nick puts together when it comes to crowd control and any other response for force. Procedural justice and community policing, broken windows and stop and frisk, another policy and procedure that has gained national attention. We do not deploy either policy. Broken windows was Mayor Giuliani and Commissioner Bratton, where they felt, and the program was successful for a period of time, if you attack the smaller crimes and the small criminals that are committing those smaller crimes, breaking a window or jumping a turnstile, and you interview and talk to those people and are aggressive in stopping those activities, they will reduce the more serious and violent crime. We do not have a broken windows policy, neither do we have a stop and frisk. Discriminatory or biased stops, searches, and arrests, they are prohibited by our policy. That policy is included within your packet. Chokeholds and other restrictions on breathing, as the lieutenant mentioned, we heard this chokehold ban throughout New York State. We had to immediately jump to our policy and strike it. Our policy did permit chokeholds in the event that somebody's life was in jeopardy, whether yourself as a police officer or to protect somebody else. When it became illegal, we had to remove that from our policy. Use of force for punitive or retaliatory reasons, it's not going to happen within the department. It's a violation. Use of force, the minimal amount of force necessary to effect arrest or to resolve the situation. That is stressed in training multiple times, multiple different training scenarios and sections talk about minimal amount of use of force, not punitive and not retaliatory in any way. And one thing I believe it's in the binder, but we failed to mention in his training program is while we went to de-escalation before anybody else, and while we went to less lethal before anybody else, we were one of the first around to also go to body cameras. The body camera program is now 8 months old. Our officers volunteered to put body cameras on them, where other police departments throughout the county are still challenging and are still looking for a give back to wear those cameras. Our officers volunteered. Our officers also volunteered in the last contract to give another free training day. That's a day they come to work without getting paid and get training for 8 hours. So our body cameras resolve a lot of these issues within this 134-page booklet. Because if that force is retaliatory or punitive in any way, the body camera will show it. Not only will our body camera show it, but our street cameras show a lot of it as well. So Big Brother is watching not only the public and the criminal element, it's also watching our officers. And they welcome that because they're responding and acting in accordance with their training. Pretextual stops are prohibited. Absolutely 100% prohibited. Pretextual stop is you can racially profile the driver or profile the occupants of the car and find that they didn't use their blinker to make a right turn or their license plate light is out and you're really truly not stopping the car for that reason. You want to get in the car because you believe something else is afoot. Informal quota for summonses, tickets, or arrests. There's no quota system, formal or informal, for tickets or arrests. We have a continuing evaluation procedure that evaluates the officer's performance. We never go and say, you need to write 15 tickets this month, you only have 6. Why do you only have 6, not 15? You have no arrests this month. They're charged with writing tickets, writing parking tickets, making arrests, performing community policing, park and walks in the school, parks and walk in the business district. So we evaluate on a daily basis their activities. That does not lead to quotas. Quotas are prohibited. If you write 0 tickets this month and you've done all your community policing and you can explain why you've issued some warnings instead, you've exercised your discretion on tickets, you've exercised discretion on arrests, that supports your ongoing evaluation of a job well done. Shooting at moving vehicles and high-speed pursuits, this is, as the lieutenant will tell you, he taught yesterday, correct?
Friday.
Taught Friday in the police academy, the new sergeants. And one of the segments of that training that he provides to all sergeants within Westchester County was civil liability. And pursuits is a big part of it. We do not engage in high-speed pursuits. We're 1 square mile. By the time speed gets up, it's too dangerous, they're gone. And as difficult as it is for me to let that person go, and trust me, it's difficult, we must let them go. High-speed pursuits, nothing good comes of a high-speed pursuit. Innocent civilians have been injured and killed, suspects have been injured and killed, as well as police officers. We do not engage in high-speed pursuits, and our policy prohibits shooting at moving vehicles. Use of SWAT teams and no-knock warrants. Again, these are all from the governor's guide. We have a emergency response team, as Nick said. The nice part about this board and the support we received is that they have permitted us to attend all the training that Nick spoke about and certify a certain component within the police department, certain numbers within the police department, to share services with other departments. If Bronxville, Eastchester, Scarsdale, Tuckahoe, and Pelham each had to have their own anti-crime team, emergency response team, SWAT officer, it would be cost prohibitive. And the training, as Nick showed you, over 100 hours training per year per officer, it would never be able to function. It would never be able to happen. So we're fortunate that we do have the use of shared services in that. Nick's team, Bronxville, Eastchester, Tuckahoe, and Pelham officers, if we train 2, Eastchester trains 4 because they're a larger department, we could get a team of 10 where that never would have happened with Bronxville alone. So we do use a SWAT team. No Knock Warrants. Our local ADA and Deputy Chief of the Mount Vernon branch is here. A no-knock warrant is an added provision within a search warrant that we can request from a judge in the event we feel evidence is going to be immediately destroyed or somebody is going to be seriously injured. We have not received a provision from in my history here in 13 years as chief for a no-knock warrant. We've done search warrants. We've done many search warrants. None of them have been no-knock. No-knock is an add-on to a warrant that says, Judge, we need to get in there and we can't tell them we're coming and because of this. The situation has never presented itself, but it is available to us. Less than lethal weaponry such as tasers and pepper spray. We removed pepper spray from our force continuum when we added tasers. Those two weapons have a conflict with each other. They don't mix well, pepper spray and electricity. So we removed the pepper spray. We are now discussing as a command staff possibly adding back pepper spray so that we have another tool for us prior to deadly physical force. Facial recognition technology, a lot of controversy about facial recognition. Our cameras do not conduct facial recognition. Our cameras do not record facial features for indexing or for profiling. We do utilize the Westchester County Real-Time Crime Center and the Westchester County District Attorney's WIC. It's the Intelligence Center for facial recognition software when an investigation warrants. We recently had a gentleman walk into a bank with a forged check, presented a driver's license with his picture on it and somebody else's name, and was able to cash that check, grand larceny, withdraw some money. We sent that license, he left the license. Sometimes they make it easy. We took that license to the RTC and the WIC. The WIC was able to facial profile the photo on the driver's license, and we were able to identify and arrest the subject. So none of the equipment or software that we have here in the village of Bronxville does facial recognition. We rely on our partners to conduct that when appropriate in criminal investigations. Yes?
A.K. Thomas and I was, but it occurs, and I think.
Absolutely.
Addressed as well.
That's an excellent point, and what I can say, and John can confirm, because he's tough. You know, I battle him with it too when he says, no, you don't have enough, and that's a perfect example. He's going to say, Chief, I'm sorry, you don't have enough. We're not going solely on facial recognition. Continue our investigation, get me photo arrays, get me video from the bank, get me a video from your street of the guy leaving in a car that's registered to him. So absolutely, there are abuses, there are bad police investigations, bad police officers, use of excessive force, absolutely happens. Here in Bronxville, facial recognition is used as a tool, and one small tool to further our investigation and develop more evidence to establish probable cause. We would never go solely on facial recognition. He wouldn't permit it. John?
Right. I've always, they'll tell you, they called me.
We've never had a better ADA here. Law enforcement strategies to reduce racial disparities and build trust. We currently using summonses rather than warrantless arrests for special offenses. We do that already. We have desk appearance tickets, VTL tickets for 511, which are misdemeanors, and 512s. Those are violations of the New York State Vehicle and Traffic Law that could be processed with a physical custodial arrest. We do not do that. We have never done it. We hand out tickets on the scene. And now with bail reform legislation that was passed, more and more defendants are being released with an appearance ticket versus custodial arrest. Diversion programs, they are issues that are determined by the courts, and we support any of those programs that are available to us and the court recommends. Restorative justice programs, I believe Bronxville may have been the first in Westchester County to establish a restorative justice program, thanks to Judge McInnes. Could not be here tonight. He's a member of the committee. I'm sure he'll have plenty of opportunity to discuss that program with you. He's very proud of it, as he should be. I was hesitant at first only because I felt we didn't have enough cases to support the program, and I didn't want it to fail. But I think he identified 1 or 2 cases, John? Two cases with defendants that we put into restorative justice rather than the criminal justice system, and the results were very positive. So we're ahead of the curve on restorative justice as well. Community-based outreach and violence interruption programs. Our youth officers and school resource officers are charged with interacting with the youth within the village and the Bronxville school. That's our community-based outreach. And again, our violent crime stats and numbers are so low that an interruption or an outreach program to prevent or deter violent crime is not supported by the statistics. Hotspot policing and focused deterrence. We've done this forever. It could be as simple as a complaints about somebody passing through stop signs and you sending a bunch of officers or traffic detail out to monitor that stop sign and write tickets, or it could be a rash of burglaries and sending out marked cars or deploying decoy cars. We've done it with the bank robberies that we saw throughout Westchester County several years ago, and we focus our patrols and we focus our efforts to deter crimes or any hotspots that pop up. And the nice part about it being small is everybody's involved. As I said, myself and the lieutenant sit upstairs, run out at any time, monitor the blotters, and we'll both throw things off each other. If we had a commercial burglary the other night, let's put out some decoy cars. Let's hire overtime and send some cars out. It's happening throughout Westchester County. Westchester County is getting absolutely destroyed with stolen cars and not breaking into cars, because unfortunately the victims are leaving them unlocked. Scarsdale, and I don't like statistics, but I'll throw it out there, 2,100% increase in stolen cars this year. They went from 2 to like 30 by now. We were aggressive in that, in monitoring via the Real-Time Crime Center, crime patterns, crime stats. We send out alerts all the time. Some people, it's funny because in the same day I'll get 2 different people at 2 different times of the day. One person will say to me, "Chief, enough with your alerts. Enough. Every night, 9 o'clock. And then 4 hours later, they come up to me and say, "Chief, I love the alerts. You got to keep going. You got to keep doing it. I left my pocketbook in the car last night. Your alert went, and I went and got it." So it's a balance, but we certainly respond to hotspots and focusing our deterrent patrols. De-escalation strategies. Nick has, I think, covered that in his training presentation. We have been de-escalating events and adding to our force continuum for many, many years. And again, first with body cameras, first with taser, and OC spray was a very long time ago to add to our force continuum. Can your community effectively identify, investigate, and prosecute hate crimes? Absolutely. Our records management system catalogs each blotter and each case that comes in, and if it's a hate crime, it's categorized as a hate crime, and the monthly report that I submit to the village board details all the crimes that occurred within the previous month. If there's a hate crime or 2 on there, that's a big number for us because we don't see many hate crimes. We would immediately respond to it. And the prosecution is simple. Our ADA is here. It's done an incredible job for us. Community outreach programs, we're considering developing a public affairs officer and a community policing officer to engage better with members of the community. We're always looking to improve our relationships with school, business, resident, house of worship. That's why this committee, some of my colleagues, while complaining about this, as I said, have said, you have 26 members on your committee? Wow, you're doing 5 or 10. How could he leave any of you out? How is deputy mayor and mayor in charge of this important task, tasked with looking at 134 pages and reforming or changing police? How could he choose one over the other? So while there's been some criticism of the size of the committee, these are, you go right to the book, and it's stakeholders within the village, gather them for an honest and fact-based discussion. You are the stakeholders.
Chief, of what's prudent today.
And absolutely, and as I say to many people, whether it's a crime prevention talk or just a community outreach, we pack a lot into this 1 square mile. We have a hospital, a movie theater, a train station, a college, and a K through 12. And how many religious institutions? How many are here tonight? I think we're up to 7 different religious institutions. He couldn't leave any of them out. Citizen advisory boards and committees. We do not have any citizen advisory boards or committees directly related to the police department. Some departments have public safety committees. Some police departments have civilian complaint review boards. We don't have either one. Partnership with community organizations and faith communities. We routinely reach out to faith-based organizations within the village. Nick has visited probably every single institution here in the village on active shooter and how to secure facilities. He offers that, as he said, he offers the civilian response to active shooter training for anyone within the village. So I think we do a very good job with community organizations and faith communities, as well as students in schools. I've already mentioned, without deploying a full-time school resource officer, which is a drain on resources for us at only 21, I think we've done a great job in training 12 youth officers and 2 SROs, spreading them out amongst the shifts and throwing them in the school whenever we possibly can to establish that relationship with the students and foster a positive relationship. Police community reconciliation. I don't think we're really far apart on relationships within police and community, and I don't see how there's any group out there that feels that they've been left out or we need to come and reconcile any differences. Marginalized communities don't apply. Involving youth in discussions and the role of law enforcement agencies. We're anxious to get back into the schools once COVID is resolved so that we can continue those discussions with the youth and get their input and strengthen the relationship between the PD and the young adults in the community. Leadership and culture is your leadership selection process designed to produce the police-community relationship you want. The promotional process, when I took over as police chief, there was no process. We're guided by the Westchester County Department of Human Resources and the New York State Civil Service Law. You take an exam to be promoted to sergeant, lieutenant, captain, or chief. And I'm giggling because there's a lieutenant in the room who's desired to be a captain. If you score top 3, you pick one of 3 and you promote them to captain. Prior to me taking over, that decision was made by the chief. He would make the decision, present it to the board, sitting as police commissioners, for their approval. Lieutenant and I put in a process where we now conduct interviews and applications of our own officers. We have chief, lieutenant, detective sergeant, and 2 sergeants on the committee, and the PBA president as well. They sit and we interview the 3 candidates, and as a group, discuss who we think is deserving of the promotion, who we think should be moved up in the ranks. And it supports the first line supervisors, the sergeants in the police department. The most important part of Don't let any chief or any captain or any lieutenant tell you that they're the most important part of a police department. It's the sergeants. The first line supervisors have the most impact on the day-to-day operations of any law enforcement agency. It's critical that we put the right people in those positions. This interview process that we developed has been working well. The statistics and the performance support that. Does your officer evaluation structure help advance your policing goals? Absolutely. Part of that promotion is also an assignment to detective, and that assignment to detective goes through a similar committee. And officer evaluation, in a bigger police department, 500 officers, they'll have a formal evaluation program where they'll actually evaluate and submit reports on an annual basis, sometimes more than that. We're fortunate in a small job that the Yonkers police chief may go through the entire year or more without seeing more than half of his officers. It just, they're in different precincts, they're in different shifts. He may never, I see my officers every day, all day. The evaluation is ongoing. The evaluation is real time. The evaluation is every day, all day. Lieutenant sees them, the sergeant sees them. I may see something tonight and say, Nick, you gotta handle that. The evaluation process is continuous, and the discipline, as you'll see from our policy, is continuous. And discipline is a critical component in professional law enforcement. The critical component in stopping and modifying behavior. We have command discipline. The command discipline is short of the board. As the deputy mayor mentioned, he sits as board of police commissioners if I bring formal charges. Prior to formal charges, I am afforded the opportunity to mete out command discipline, taking vacation days, taking personal days, taking time away from officers that might violate the rules and regulations. We have definitely exercised, I have exercised my powers to mete out command discipline when appropriate, and it helps to change behavior.
If I might add to that,
What incentive do you offer your officers for effective policing, the assignments to the detective division, the assignments to traffic enforcement, the promotions to sergeant? The constant evaluation is what we look at as far as an incentive. We can't offer money, we can't offer gifts, we offer assignments and a path to advance your career by a specialized assignment or a promotion based on your work product and your work ethic. Hiring and promotional process, build an effective and diverse leadership team. Again, we're guided by the police exam, we're guided by our officers that submit resumes to our department. I would like to quickly go back to the mayor's and deputy mayor's column and just highlight of our 21 officers, 2 are female, 2 are Hispanic and speak fluent Spanish. 1 is Jamaican descent, 1 is African American. All 6 of these officers have been hired during the tenure of Chief Satrielli and our senior trustees, resulting in one of the most diverse police departments in the county. I'm proud of our diversity, I'm proud of our hiring and promotional practices, and the statistics prove that out. What is your strategy to ensure your department's cultural norms and informal processes reflect your formal rules and procedures? Okay, this is the 21st century policing answer. It's organizational culture eats policy for lunch. You can read through that. It kind of speaks for itself. The governor would be happy to hear that we threw in something from the 21st century policing model. Our goal is to ensure, as I said before, that all residents, visitors, merchants, and people passing through the village do so in a safe manner, are not victimized by criminals, and are treated professionally and respectfully by police officers they come in contact with. And this culture that we've instilled in them It's established by the leaders and the command staff within the department and reinforced whenever possible. That's how we stick to the important components of the 21st century policing model. Tracking and reviewing use of force and identifying misconduct. 42 complaints. We don't miss a single complaint. As crazy as it sounds, the dispatching of an animal, pulling a gun out and shooting. So while we probably will categorize that in a different way, we're definitely not going to ever remove that use of force report from our policies and procedures. Now you can see when any of these circumstances are present in an incident or a case, the officer must report that use of force. Brandishes, uses, or discharges a firearm at the direction of another person, chokehold, or similar restraint that applies to pressure of the throat, windpipe in a manner to hinder breathing or reduce air intake. That chokehold's been banned, so we will Nick, when he comes back from that de-escalation training, there will be a component, I'm sure, of that training that permits some sort of physical restraint that applies pressure, not near the throat or windpipe, but maybe to the neck or back or chest. And the newest, one of the newer reforms that the governor signed, executive order that he signed, is that now we must report all 42 as they occur, must be reported moving forward to the New York State DCJS, Division of Criminal Justice Services. And they will also review and oversee our use of force. What internal review is required for after use of force, Nick explained it, goes to the sergeant, goes to the lieutenant, comes to me, goes to the training committee. If there's an issue, if there's a problem, we can retrain, we can use a counseling form, we can use command discipline, or in extreme cases, we can send that case to the Board of Police Commissioners for discipline. And that has never happened in my history here. Does your department review officers' use of force and/or misconduct or in performance reviews? Performance reviews are ongoing, real time, every day, all day long. So if there's a use of force tonight, the sergeant will review it tonight, and tomorrow morning, the chief and lieutenant are in looking at it right away. So there's no delay. Does your department use external independent reviewers to examine use of force or misconduct? We do not. We have discussed the possibility of sharing a neighboring lieutenant or high-ranking officer to review use of force and also to sit in on our promotional committee. That's under discussion. Does your department leverage early intervention systems to prevent problematic behavior? We do not leverage early intervention systems. We're, again, the benefit of being small. I know I've repeated myself, but I hope you remember that. The benefit of being small is that nothing's hidden. We're a family of 21. Everybody knows everybody else. Everybody knows the family, the kids, who's going here, who's going there. A change in behavior, an immediate change in behavior by any one of our officers would be immediately picked up on by his peers, his boss, or myself. And we have the ability through the Westchester County Department of Public Safety to engage their employee assistance officer. He's been an officer for 33 years. We went to the police academy together. We have offered his assistance, his expertise, and his training to our officers in several critical incidents they responded to, several fatal incidents they responded to where we feel they may need to speak with somebody or have an intervention, and that service is offered to them at any time. He's like John Thomas. 3 o'clock in the morning, Rob Barber's going to pick up his phone. Does your department review sentinel or near-miss events? Does your department respond to questionable use of forces with non-punitive measures? That's your, as I said, counseling form, retraining. Internal accountability for misconduct. They know the policy, they know the use of force. They've seen the command discipline that's been given out, that's posted. That's also a deterrent effect to other officers who may be thinking about violating policy. And we also have a policy that's attached to this guidebook on the duty to intercede, which is also very popular at this point. After the George Floyd incident, you saw the 2 officers, or 3 or 4, once the response was up to a full response, that did not pull that officer off of Mr. Floyd. They would be facing serious charges here within the village of Bronxville for violating our duty to intercede policy, and without question would be likely at the table next to John Thomas and before our Board of Trustees for discipline. Does your department have a clear and transparent process for investigating reports of misconduct? Yes, that's the personnel complaint form that the lieutenant referenced, and anybody who calls to make a complaint against an officer or sends an email to make a complaint against an officer is sent that form, and the internal affairs officer handles that investigation. Does your department respond to officer misconduct with appropriate disciplinary measures? Absolutely. Policy 108-1. What procedures are in place to ensure substantial complaints of misconduct or complaints, when appropriate, are cases referred to either the district attorney or another prosecutor? Absolutely. All the time. Does your department expect leaders? The Westchester County District Attorney's Office has a public integrity unit. We have frequent conversations and communication with them. They're ready to investigate any acts of or alleged acts of misconduct within the police department, as is John Thomas. Does your department expect leaders and officers to uphold the department's values and culture when off duty? Without question. 1 or 2 of our command disciplines in the last 13 years were the result of off-duty behavior. Citizen oversight and other external accountability. Does or should your department have some form of civilian oversight over misconduct, investigations, or policy reform? Well, the civilian oversight over policy reform is ongoing right now. You are a civilian committee charged with reviewing policy procedure within the Bronxville Police Department, and you're tasked with coming up with recommendations for change. Is there an easy, accessible, and well-publicized process for the member of the public to report complaints about police misconduct? Yes, we expect that one recommendation from this committee might be to post our civilian complaint reform, complaint form and policy on the police department's website to make it easier for a civilian to lodge that complaint. So I gave you a little answer probably to one of the tests that Deputy Mayor is going to give you. Our investigation outcomes reported to the complainant are they reported to the public? Should the department or citizen complain review entity, if any, accept anonymous complaints? Anonymous complaints are difficult to investigate. However, when that anonymous complaint involves criminal activity, criminal conduct, or potential criminal activity or conduct, or the potential for physical injury or serious physical injury to somebody, we will accept an anonymous complaint and conduct an investigation. Local legislator engages in formal oversight of the police department. Should any changes, you heard about the Westchester County Police Act. You heard the deputy mayor discuss how they sit as a board of police commissioners. They have direct oversight and all the powers of a police officer, with the exception of carrying a weapon. I know how that upsets you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Is your police department accredited by any external entity? We are not an accredited agency. Does your police department do an annual community survey to track level of trust? We have not. What police incident and complaint data should be collected? What data should be available to the public? All officers are required to be diligent in collecting all pertinent information in any interaction with the public. The information collected increases when officers are dealing with the investigation of crimes or issuing summonses. Basic information collected every time an officer responds to a call includes all necessary pedigree information from the caller and any other person who is involved. We collect the minimal amount of information necessary to proceed with an investigation or resolve a complaint. How should the law enforcement agency leverage data to drive policing strategies? Our cameras are the biggest tool that we have that drives our data and our response to crime at this point, as well as the Real-Time Crime Center and the Westchester Intel Center. We utilize all of our partners in leveraging data and driving strategies and making the most use of what limited resources that we have here. And the decoy cars and the alerts are a perfect example of that. Those alerts undoubtedly, no question, have resulted in reduced criminal activity within the village. We've had multiple evenings over the last 6 weeks where Eastchester, Pelham, Mount Vernon, Yonkers, New Rochelle, and Tuckahoe all had criminal activity overnight involving stolen cars and larcenies from cars, and we had none. There's no question in my mind that the alerts and the cooperation and the locking of the cars and removing of valuables in plain sight has contributed to that. How can your police department make its policies and procedures more transparent? We are in the process, as the lieutenant mentioned, of transitioning to Lexipol to manage our policy and procedures moving forward. Assuming that a recommendation from this committee may be full implementation of Lexipol, and let's stop using whiteout and a typewriter. When we move to full implementation of Lexipol, there is an opportunity for us to present our policies on our website and have them for public view. How can your police department demonstrate a commitment to transparency? I did that already. How can your police department ensure adequate transparency in its use of automated systems and high-risk technologies? We do not have any automated systems or high-risk technology. The closest thing that would come to this question would be our license plate readers. We have one fixed license plate reader up on White Plains Road that the Westchester County Department of Public Safety donated to us. And we have, each of our police cars have mobile license plate readers. That data is stored and collected. It's not shared with anyone other than a law enforcement executive and agency, and the data is not used for anything other than furthering criminal investigations. Should your department leverage video cameras to ensure law enforcement accountability and increase transparency? We are way ahead of the curve on that. Our cameras now between the streets and the garages are close to 70, and our body camera program, as I said, is 8 months old. Recruiting a diverse workforce, the mayor's column has properly addressed that. We are, if not the most, one of the most diverse police departments for a village within Westchester County and maybe within the state of New York when you consider the 2010 census data based on the population we serve. What are ways in which your agency recruits diverse candidates that better represent the demographic? Our recruiting and hiring, while we are subject to the Westchester County Department of Human Resources list of police applicants, we also have been aggressive in hiring officers that have resigned from other police departments and become reinstated here in Bronxville. So many departments will not hire resignation reinstatements. They've moved away from that. They have gone only to the civil service list. You're limited in the civil service list depending on the grade structure on who's on that list. So when we look at the entirety of our police department and we have an opening, if we have an officer who's a minority officer who leaves, we would love to replace that officer and continue to provide a diverse police department. And that resignation reinstatement process helps us in that endeavor. What are ways in which you can reevaluate hiring practices? Is testing to remove barriers? I don't believe there are any barriers in place when you are willing to do resignation reinstatement. And we're also governed by civil service law on hiring. We can't just choose anybody. How can you encourage youth in your community to pursue careers in law enforcement? Our youth officers and SROs take an active role within the school. That role is expanding. We encourage anybody who might be interested in beginning a law enforcement career to come to the police department and have discussions with us. In my 33 years, we've had one resident who became a police officer, did his 20 years and retired, still lives in the village, and he did a tremendous job for us, Jimmy Fleming. What actions can your agency take to foster the continued development and retention of diverse officers? We do not have a problem with retention, as do other places. Many police departments are continually hiring officers because officers leave. We have not had an issue with retention, and therefore find no reason to change. How can you develop officer training programs that reflect your community values and build trust between police and the community you serve? Nick did a great job of explaining our training programs and how we continually adapt to what's happening around us. What training policies can you adopt to ensure that police officers continuously receive high-quality, relevant, and in-service training? The 36 to 48 hours of training will be increased dramatically by our move to Lexapol, when we can push out those daily training bulletins and control who gets what training and how many hours per week. We could do, we can increase that to 4 or 5 hours a week per officer. How can leadership training improve community policing and strengthen relations between your police department and the members of the public? Leadership training reinforces a level of discipline for actions taken in the performance of duty. We need to have standards and programs established at every level of leadership and reinforce these by training and experience. The FBI leads class that 5 of our supervisors went to reinforces that, as well as law enforcement executive development supervisory training sessions that we send our officers to. Can your police department use training programs to avoid incidents involving unnecessary use of lethal and non-lethal force? That's the whole point. That's the whole point to the training, is reinforce our use of force policy, continually examine the use of force, and that real-time evaluation of our officers will hopefully prevent any excessive use or use of deadly physical force. And we are, again, stressing the de-escalation tactics that you're hearing about throughout the country. How can your police department use its training programs to avoid potential bias incidents and build strong connections with communities of color and vulnerable populations? We're always looking for additional training to better serve our community. Training staff is looking to add implicit bias and community outreach training to our annual training curriculum. We were in this room this week doing our in-service 8-hour training, and we always add programs that are relevant to what's going on throughout the country in policing and throughout the county in policing. And Nick and our other instructors do a great job of that. We had Police Officer Lewis here, Sergeant Carroll here, Sergeant DeYoung here, and Sergeant Anderson, who all did a different section for our in-service training.
We also had members of the village trustees present as well.
Correct. How can your training programs help officers effectively, safely respond to individuals experiencing mental health crisis or struggling with substance abuse? That's a discussion we had prior, and I would welcome that countywide task force. And again, we're fortunate the hospital's here. Hopefully, they would have some input on that task force and some trained personnel that could come out right away. We do have mental health crisis training, but we do understand also that response to those kind of incidents. Sometimes a police officer, just his presence or her presence alone in uniform can escalate those kind of calls. We're trained in the use of naloxone for overdoses. It's important to note, Nick went through all the training and all the equipment, and there are some people that may approach you as a committee member. You're now out there, you're public, and wonder, well, nothing happens in Bronxville. Well, John Thomas can tell you that that's wrong, but we've used naloxone. We've deployed it. We've deployed our tasers. We've deployed our patrol rifles. We've deployed our pepper spray. We've responded to report of an active shooter. We've made gun arrests. So while some people may challenge or ask you, I hear you're on this committee, come on, what could possibly happen in Bronxville? Well, it happens, and our officers need to be trained and ready to respond and well-equipped to respond to those calls so that we don't have a situation that develops into excessive use of force or improper use of force. Support officer wellness and well-being. I mentioned the Westchester County Department of Public Safety. I think I covered practices and procedures, yes. Department of Public Safety's Employee Assistance Officer. The Village of Bronxville also has an Employee Assistance Program. This is where being small and being a family is not an advantage. I would hesitate to think that an officer would go to somebody they work with in the village hall to discuss some problems they're having. So we lean heavily on the County Department of Public Safety and Officer Rob Barber, who's been doing it for 33 years, in the event any of our officers need to speak to somebody about a call they've been on or something they've been going through in their personal life. Are there ways to address officer wellness? How can you effectively and proactively address the mental health challenges experienced by many police officers throughout their career? After any critical incident commander officer, it comes directly from my office and the lieutenant's office, that the availability of that EAP, take advantage of it. It's confidential. I don't even know if anybody has reached out or not. Rob is trained to handle that. He has an entire unit that's trained to handle that, and they do an incredible job. How can you address the well-being of an officer after a traumatic event? Same thing. We've had multiple traumatic events, several within the last 6 weeks, resulting in deaths. They were horrific scenes for anybody that responded to them, and we have provided the contact information for Rob and his team in the event any of our officers just need to meet with them for a cup of coffee or a soda and discuss what they're feeling, what they're experiencing. I would like to, again, thank the deputy mayor for assembling such an impressive team and committee, and I really do look forward to the process.
Well, Chief, leave that mask off.
Okay.
Although.
Is that in order?
For a second, yes. So, Chief, thank you very much for that fulsome review. But we have a few minutes. I recognize it's late. I'm enormously grateful for the attention level and the engagement. Any questions we should address now with the chief here? Seeing none. I will also email this out. Rich and Jim, can you pass this out? This is just a schedule of events for the 2 public meetings. We are scheduling 2 public meetings, November 10 and November 17. Location TBD. We will be sending out an email and posting this on the village website and sending out alerts. We will then have a meeting with just the committee in early December, as I mentioned, to talk about our findings. In early January, we will have a meeting with the police department to talk about our findings and recommendations prior to submitting them to the village board. Is there anything else we've left?
No, we
Mayor, Jim, Palmer?
We'll be very careful with those November meetings. We are still under the executive order for COVID-19 of gatherings no more than 50. We are 26 and staff, we're close to 30. That's why Deputy Mayor chose 2 dates. We'll allow some input via email, I believe you're gonna offer, and we'll limit those. They'll probably do an RSVP.
We won't be doing an RSVP. We have to be very COVID.
We have to be very careful.
Do virtual or like a Zoom meeting?
Or teams.
We can consider that as long as
Yeah.
Nick doesn't run it.
Yeah,
You don't have that problem.
yeah, and I think we will, in addition, I think that's a great suggestion. It will also be videotaped so you can see it ex post, and we'll also be having a series of minutes drawn up, who spoke and kind of what the point was. So if you can make those meetings, fantastic. If you can't, there will be the medium to see it in a recorded fashion and minutes and also email correspondence.
I think his suggestion was for the community meeting, if you offer it via Zoom, then more people can join.
Yes, absolutely.
So, or if you have a live stream, then a way people can email you live or text their questions, then you can just open it up to a much larger audience.
That's a great suggestion, and Jim, let's look into that. Yeah, we're all Zoom compliant now.
As we go through these responses and look at them perhaps after this meeting, who do we send our comments to? You. Okay.
And I'll make sure they get disseminated
Okay.
to the appropriate people.
And I'll add just one other general comment here. So I've lived in the town for 8 years, and I've had, and I want to say, look, there's a lot going on in the country that's created an environment where we should be doing this. And I'm a believer in the fact that evolution doesn't occur, social evolution doesn't occur linearly. There's usually some change that occurs to cause it. But in many ways, what I've seen is that we're kind of ahead of these lockstep changes that are occurring here. I've been impressed with the police force. I've had some firsthand experience with it in the last 6 months in organizing a walk that we did in town for Black Lives Matter. And many people in this room are part of that. And what I can tell you is that we have a very receptive police force to that lockstep change. And I saw that firsthand. And so I love that we're going through this. And I look forward to learning more, and I think that there's a lot that anyone can do when that lockstep change happens, right? None of us are perfect, and we have a police force here and a chief and Chief Secretary that's very open to this stuff. So I look forward to working with you on it. I look forward to working with everyone on this committee on it. But this is a great meeting to get us informed. We've got a lot of homework to do.
Yep.
I'm going to study this, and we'll come back and provide comments on how we think we can improve. But great first meeting.
Oh, great, thank you. There's, as you said, there's a lot of bricks to put into the foundation to create the right thought process and awareness before you come up with those recommendations.
Right.
So, and thank you for your comments. I agree 100%. And then, as I said, it's once this executive order came out, I said, you know, we should have been doing this anyway. This is a great opportunity for us to improve upon what I think is really good already. And I think, Mickey, to your point, I think we had an extraordinary event this spring that you were involved in organizing in a very difficult environment. And you say, wow, that's very special and very impressive. And I think this will be the same. I view this process as step 2.
I could not believe the turnout we got, and I could not believe how much the police force was involved in it.
Yeah.
If I have the numbers right, some 20-odd officers were directly involved, interacting with the community members and leading up to it, which was a lot of time and effort that they put into it. So I was very impressed with, you know, this committee is in charge of police community relations, and I think that was a really nice example of how I think we're doing some things right.
Well, thank you very much. Well, thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it, and thank you to the chief and Nick and Lieutenant Bunyan, Peter North, Detective Sergeant Anderson. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your input and consideration. Your time is very valuable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.